Hi there, I'm Danny Henderson. Welcome back to my fabulous Disclosure channel. And the Disclosure King himself, the one and only Dr. Michael Salla. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, Dr. Salla. How are you, my love?
Hi, Danny. Great to be here.
It's so good to have you. You are so busy. All the work you're doing in full disclosure, as we know it's happening, never more so than just, less than 2 months ago at this stage, where you and I and others, Elena Danan in particular, Tony Rodriguez, JP, we witnessed with almost 1,000 people a fleet of solid spacecraft, except they weren't UAPs because that's a mind wash program. We don't ever say UAP. We're not going to fall for that game. They certainly weren't UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They were identified spacecraft, were they not, Dr. Sala? Over to you, sir. What happened?
Yes, that's a very important thing. There are many people who have contact experiences or claim to have contact experiences, but there's very few that can actually get the UFOs or get the spacecraft to show up at a particular time. I've experienced that in the past with some South American contactees. So for the GSIC event, I mean, this was when Elena Danan, she had said that there was going to be a flyover, that she had made an arrangement with the Galactic Federation through Thorhan Aredian, her primary contact, that they would do a flyover. And just for people that are maybe not so familiar with this process, that's not an easy thing to do for any contactee, for anyone, because you put your reputation on the line when you say, well, they're going to show up at this time. And of course, if nothing happens, then they've got egg all over their face. But what happened was really spectacular that night. I mean, first of all, there were close to 1,000 people. I was there. I had a laser pointer as well, and sure enough, soon after Elena began, did a little bit of an intro, and you did your intro, and then we began looking up. Sure enough, there were some UFOs, and it began with this kind of triangular shape, and that was like a TR3B. And then after that, there were uh, fleets or a an arrangement of a number of these lights in the sky, these UFOs that were flying. And what really convinced me that these were UFOs rather than birds or something like that was I shined my laser pointer towards them, and this happened twice. I shined my laser pointer at towards them, around them, just to circle it for the crowd to see. And twice a green light flashed back from the craft. Now that's very important because that first of all, a flock of geese don't go around with a laser pointer and shine it back at you. So it was clearly not a flock of geese or anything like that, or birds. And this is something that other craft have done. I've done interviews with other people like James Gilliland and Peter Maxwell Slattery, and yeah, this is common. This happens a lot, that they'll shine a light at the craft and then it will shine a light back. And this wasn't a kind of lens flare. It wasn't a kind of satellite, because it was a formation of craft. It wasn't SpaceX, the space or the Starlink satellites. So that happened twice. And there were, like, I think three or four of these fleets of, or yeah, these small squadrons of craft. And so it was very spectacular. People had a blast watching that.
It was so thrilling. For me, one of the best nights of my entire life. And the pride for Elena Danan being the woman, the one who organized this, confirming also on that great night that the good military work with the good and benevolent ETs. Something that no one's ever been able to prove before. What we have in the 1950s at the time of Dwight Eisenhower is that administration and us finding out that they did a deal behind his back to take technology, but that was negative and nefarious. Where else have we ever been able to prove, Dr. Sala, that the good ETs from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, benevolent military, who care about what happens in the solar system and on this planet, because whatever happens here affects them, of course, too, to working with the White Hats and the Earth Alliance. Where else have you seen that being proven in your studies and your research?
Yeah, that was very important because you actually had this triangular shaped craft, with the lights that looked like a TR-3B, which is a human-built craft, probably flown out of one of the uh, Space Force bases nearby, probably Cheyenne uh, Space Force base. That was the TR-3B, and that clearly is an Earth-based ship that belongs to Space Command or to Space Force, and so that flew over, and that was very important. And that was the first craft that everyone saw. And then soon after that, you saw at a very high elevation, you saw these fleets of craft flying high overhead, and that signified that there was a kind of collaboration between the two, which is exactly what Elena has been saying for several years now, that the Earth Alliance has reached agreements with the Galactic Federation of Worlds for disclosure, that they're collaborating. And this is the same thing that JP has been saying as well. So this was, I thought, a really important event. And of course, there's you get nothing but crickets from the mainstream UFO community because it doesn't fit their agenda, it doesn't fit their narrative. They're wanting to portray UFOs as this unknown threat flying near sensitive military installations, whereas we know from what Elena and others have been saying, and also from that event that night, that these are benevolent ETs that are here to help us, and if you connect with them, you can have a profound transformative experience.
It was so joyous. And for me, one of the greatest things was not only proving, because, we've most of us on our team at GISIC, we've had experience with off-worlders, with ET craft, with other beautiful happenings. And to share it with the audience and say, listen, we told you, like I set the stage, Elena bought the craft, but we were all part of this. And it's all our experiences that allowed this to be, a reverence, But it was the emotion of the crowd, the screaming, the laughing, the crying, the joy, the utter joy. And there were so many skeptics, as there should be there. And then the next day we were saying, or people were saying, now I know. I saw and now I know. And that's so beautiful. Now I do go on about my conference a lot. I don't want to kind of overexpose it, or be a bore or anything. Because, people get tired of hearing about People get, well, it's the greatest disclosure conference on the planet. And we proved it. And I will keep going and going and going. And I have a campaign. I'm calling out Joe Rogan, Piers Morgan. I don't care if people don't like Piers Morgan, for example. It's like, oi, boys, over here. We got to like call them out now. The big mouths on the big platforms. We made history and it's being ignored. Not on my watch, Dr. Salla. You know what I'm like, bit of a warrior. Now, let's talk about other people that are blocking truth. Let's talk about people like Jeremy Corbell, the filmmaker. Who is he anyway? Yeah. And why is he disinforming when he clearly has absolutely no experience with real ETs? As far as I can feel, there's no resonance in him that I see. What are your thoughts?
Well, Jeremy Corbell is a filmmaker, and he's worked a lot with George Knapp and worked on the Bob Lazar case. And he has made it very clear that he is in alignment with the views that Bob Lazar has expressed, that these UFOs, these flying saucer craft that were retrieved and were being studied at S4 facility in Area 51, that these have not been successfully reverse engineered. And this is something that Lazar has put out. Now, there's reasons for why I mean, I think he's reporting truthfully on what he experienced. I think that he was exposed to this operation out of S4, and S4, for people that aren't familiar, that really is a museum. It is not where they're doing the primary research and development on flying saucer craft. I mean, that was happening at other places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, or at China Lake, that's the Navy's research facility, or at Dugway Proving Grounds. They've got underground facilities there. That's where the premier research has been going on. So what Bob Lazar was exposed to was really, I believe, was a kind of like a limited hangout. I mean, he was exposed to that, and I think it was because people did a psychological profile on him. I mean, he only worked at the S4 facility for several months, and you look at the conditions under which he was employed. You look at all of that, and it all gets very suspicious. Like, well, how come they didn't do a psychological profile on this guy? Surely they, I mean, he was working with other, I mean, he was friends with other researchers like John Lear at the time. And John Lear is a very interesting guy. He's a CIA asset, and he's kind of like, he's also on that dodgy side of kind of UFO disclosure. And I think that's where the kind of CIA like really excels, is that they will put out some information that is truthful, but it will be framed in a way that deceives the public. And I think that's what happened with the Bob Lazar information, that he put out that, okay, these craft, uh, that there were some scientific teams studying them, but these scientific teams were really ineffective. They weren't making progress, and it would be decades before anything meaningful would happen. And so Bob Lazar, after being exposed for several months to this program at S4, then he became a whistleblower. George Knapp was the one that kind of like presented his testimony to the world through Las Vegas TV. And at some point, Jeremy Corbell kind of got involved, and he interviewed Lazar and investigated his case, and confirmed that, Lazar's the real deal, that, yeah, he did work at S4 and he did have these experiences. But the problem is that, what Lazar saw was what he was allowed to see. I think he was kind of given access to information that would actually help propel a kind of limited hangout, which is what we're seeing right now, and that is being pushed aggressively right now by the legacy media, by a kind of a group of UFO researchers associated with Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp. You've got whistleblowers like David Grush, journalists like Michael Schellenberger, and a whole bunch of others that are putting out the same kind of information that, yeah, UFOs have been, they've crashed, they've been retrieved, they've been studied going all the way back to 1947 and even earlier, 1933. And the Italians, that UFO crash was brought to the United States eventually. And so they're saying, but yeah, none of these craft have been successfully reverse engineered, that they're hanging out at places, they're being stored at places like S4 or in corporate facilities like Lockheed, Martin Skunk Work, and then, no progress has been made, which is a massive disinformation, because they have been reverse engineered.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so like utterly tired and bored of these mostly men in the public eye who are not telling the bloody truth. And so I feel like, someone like you, Dr. Michael Salla, you are, a scholar in conflict resolution. You are trusted. You are currently a nominee for a role in the Trump administration as a trusted man, a person who's done so many years, over 30 years of study in the field of suppressed technology, among other great, mentionable subjects, that you're at that level. Then we have Elena Danan, who has proven her physical connection. She has brought history of the planet via the Cedars in her book. She has catalogued a stunning array of other ET species. She proved that the Earth Alliance are working with the Galactic Federation of Worlds. She's the only one that's done that, to my knowledge so far. Then we have JP from the military, who has spoken about going to Ganymede's moon, which is the moon, one of the moons of Jupiter, as we know. going to Mars, going to the moon, revealing so much information, going to inner Earth, going to the Colorado states, the the Redlands where there are literal Egyptian temples in America and artifacts that are hidden. He is standing as one who's been given permission by higher ups in the military to put this information out. And then we have Tony Rodriguez, who was also used as an asset from a little boy to an adult in the space program, the secret space program. And then you've got me. I feel like I'm coming behind you all with a baseball bat going, Shazam! Pow! Like, wake everybody the bloody hell up, because I'm not standing for it. I'm not standing for it. Now, let's talk about another bugger who I'm really cross with right now because he's written a book and he's skewing the narrative, which is a lie, that we're under attack. And that's Luis Elizondo, forcing us to believe and accept that we are under threat as a humanity. What are your thoughts on Luis Elizondo, please?
Okay, well, Luis Elizondo, I think he is a very interesting. Well, I'm not quite sure. I guess you would call him a whistleblower. That he left government service because he felt that the UFO issue was not being adequately covered or taken seriously enough by higher ups within the Pentagon. And his take was that, well, the Pentagon weren't taking UFOs seriously as a national security threat. And so he was kind of running this kind of informal program within the Pentagon that was called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And he was kind of like really looking at the whole phenomenon from the perspective of, is this a national security threat? And I think he kind of like convinced himself or was convinced that these UFOs were a national security threat. And, based on his kind of research and his clearances, he reached the conclusion that these were not US craft, that these were not being manufactured by any American corporation. Now, this is where you have to kind of like appreciate the fact that Luis Elizondo admits that he was a kind of senior bureaucrat. I think it was a GS-15, as he describes it, within the kind of hierarchy of public service, which is just below the senior executive service. So he was a kind of middle level to high level bureaucrat. But to be honest, I've been working in this field for over 20 years now, and the secrecy system is very compartmentalized. It really doesn't matter what your position is. You could be Secretary of Defense, you could be the President of the United States. If those that have the keys to the kingdom decide that you are not to be read in, you're not going to know. And Luis Elizondo just was not read into these programs. I mean, for example, he describes his involvement of this effort to try to get Lockheed Martin to share some technology with the ORSAP people that was being funded by the U.S. Senate, and that had failed, that they weren't able to get permission to do that. So they didn't know what kind of foreign materials had been recovered. So Luis Elizondo, he had access to some of the information. So he knows that there were crash retrieval programs, and he knows that some of these craft have been studied by various corporations such as Lockheed. He knows that many of these UFOs have been seen near sensitive military sites and all of that. And he's kind of put all of that together and arrived at his conclusion that they're a national security threat. But the problem is he hasn't been given access to the deeper levels of secrecy, which is that, yes, these craft have been successfully reverse engineered, that there are fleets of these craft that are operated by the different kind of like corporations and the military, that Air Force had a space program, that the Navy has a space program, that the NRO has a space program, using all of these reverse engineered craft. So he's not familiar with all of that, and he actually goes. He actually has said on more than one occasion that there is no evidence that any of these craft are US made or manufactured. And that's BS, because there is a lot of evidence, a lot of witnesses that have talked about that. You mentioned JP. I mean, he just recently retired from the US Army, and he was taken on board some of these craft that were run by US Air Force Space Command, that the Air Force operated that the Air Force had a unit, the kind of special operations unit, they call them the Air Force Commandos, that JP was taken on one of their craft that was a flying rectangle craft, and he saw their patch and all of that. And he actually took photos of the craft. So it's not just that JP says that, yeah, he was taken on these craft. He saw Air Force personnel with the lapel. Forgot the exact name. The insignia of Air Force Special Operations. That these are the Air Force Commandos, and that they're manning and running this flying rectangle out of MacDill Air Force Base in Florida. So this shows that there is a secret space program, but Luis Elizondo doesn't kind of like acknowledge any of that. He just kind of sticks to his little kind of perspective that, yes, based on what he's directly experienced during his government service, that there's no evidence of these being US manufactured craft. But of course not. He was not read in. I mean, he did not have access to that compartmented program. And I mean, and that really is a big problem, because now he's been given kind of center stage by the legacy media. He's become the poster boy for disclosure, and he's really putting out what really at best is misinformation.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what disturbs me the most, which is why I call him out as a disinformer, because I know, and you know, and most people know that people aren't read in. I did a broadcast last night with the satanic survivor of the underground cult around the Vatican, which is coming out. And she and I were talking about the fact that no matter who you are at the top, still you don't have access to all the principles, sectors, quadrants, and all the information therein. But have we got selective amnesia? People like him. We have reports, documents, government proof that the ETs were working with Dwight Eisenhower's administration. Have they really forgotten just a few years ago that the ETs were already here? Oh, how did they get here? Oh, they got the bus from Mars. It's like, be quiet, you nunchucks. It's just so irritating. You know, the way they go around and treating us like deadheads. You know, they are the one-celled amoebas that don't understand how clever we are. People like me, people like you, people like our small team, we've all had interactions with off-worlders. We know they're real. No one's telling us any different, you know, and we've brought enough physical evidence and enough proof at this stage. So I'm calling them all out. You know, they're not fit for purpose. They're denying history. We have a man who was in the Pentagon known by as Val Thor or Valiant Thor. There's photographs of him. There's documents of him. There's information and stories about him pissing people off, the secret police or the secret service, because he could move through walls, because he's a higher density being. You know, we had all of that, and they've tried to all cover it up. But, you know, too bad, so sad. The information's there. And what we need to do, I feel, is just push it in front of people and say, no, 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 you're not getting away with that nonsense anymore. It's not the 70s. This is 2024. We're taking back our planet. And if you can't do your job, you're going to get called out, and you're going to get moved to the side. And people like Dr. Michael Salla are being put into government roles. How about those apples? You know, so people have really got a job to do right now, right? An opportunity to get real. I want to say that, you know, they do not have the power, certainly not over me, certainly not over you. So how do you feel when these numbnuts at the top, they are force feeding humanity little tidbits? I mean, do they seriously think they can continue that? I mean, look at that photograph years ago with the flyover, the UFOs that flew over the White House. when we came to discover it wasn't aliens flying those spacecraft, it was the bloody Nazis who came over from Antarctica apparently in their reverse engineered anti-gravity craft that the American government knew full well about. Much, much, much proof about that. William Byrd, Operation High Jump. Again, do we really have that bad of an amnesia that we're going to ignore all of that information? What are your thoughts on that back history?
Yeah, there's a lot of really important history there. I mean, that 1952 Washington flyover, I mean, that's important. Well, that's very relevant because now we just had another Washington flyover of five craft. And as you mentioned, those craft that flew over Washington, D.C. in the 1952, there were like on three successive weekends, there were formations of craft. And we know that some of those craft were involved with the Dark Fleet. That was the German program out of Antarctica, and that was really forcing the Truman administration and eventually the Eisenhower administration to reach a deal, which they did. A deal was struck. Now we get to what's happening today. I mean, there was just this last week, there were five craft that were witnessed flying over Washington D.C. over the Capitol there, and people have started questioning, well, what's all that about? And of course, this is a no-fly zone that they flew over that area. And of course, people are saying, well, this is all part of a kind of like a kind of growing narrative of UFOs being this kind of threat. And so, this could well be. I think right now, Danny, I think what we're witnessing right now is that it's almost like a Mexican standoff.
Mm.
On the one hand, you've got the deep state with their kind of military and space assets, and they want to pull off a false flag event. They want to basically trick humanity into some kind of uh, this false flag event that we are being attacked by aliens, by these unknown UFOs, and so they want to go down that path. But on the other hand, you've got the Earth Alliance, the White Hats, working with the Galactic Federation and other positive extraterrestrials. They want to reveal the truth about benevolent extraterrestrials being here to visit us. And so the deep state, and the Black Hats, they're trying to kind of like stage some kind of false flag event, but not make out that it's going to be like, well, involving extraterrestrials, because they know if they do, then that'll open the door to the galactics like revealing themselves. And then we get to see the real disclosure. So I think what we're going to see is probably over the next month, as the Trump administration kind of like takes shape and comes to power on January 20, we're going to see the deep state play its hand or its final cards. And I think what they're going to do is that they're going to play a card that of this kind of like this unknown UFO threat. They don't know what it is, but it's behaving threateningly. There's already uh, a bill that's been proposed before the Senate, before Congress, authorizing or requiring the Pentagon to shoot down the UFOs. This was something that was Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has admitted that she's drafted a bill to authorize the Pentagon to start shooting at these UFOs. So if you add it all up, it's like, well, we're being told that we don't know what they are. They're a kind of like a national security threat. They're violating no they're violating no flight zones. They're flying over sensitive military facilities, and that orders are being given to authorize the shoot down of these craft. So I think this is where we could get into some kind of really strange false flag type event. But I think this is where the deep state has to be very careful, because if they go too far, then they open the door to the galactics revealing themselves and putting a stop to it all. So I think it's going to be a very interesting 6 weeks before the Trump administration comes in.
Yeah, absolutely true. One of the things that bothers me about the militaries globally and the ownership of them by the cabal, etc., and the deep state, of course, there's a good element. We know that. That's not in dispute here. It's a very dark side, shadow government, shadow military cabal. The dark side of the cabal lost their allegiance with the Greys and the reptilians that were helping keep things obviously much more threatened. Now that has been released. We know that to be true. We know that to be fact. We've heard it on many different levels. We're seeing it. We're seeing all the systems collapsing down. Everyone's being revealed. My concern is this. Because of the dreadful way, the inhumane way that militaries globally treat their soldiers, and because they lie about having reverse engineered craft, it is my suggestion that in order for them to fulfill this horror and allow UFOs to be shot down, it won't be UFOs from off planet. It'll be military personnel in reverse engineered craft that are sent up as guinea pigs to make the point, because the American government have proven over and over and over again, in the militaries they're in, that they don't care about the lives of their soldiers. And if they did, it's very simple. We wouldn't see them lying on the side of the road begging for money, homeless, freezing cold. A good military that cares for its people and a good government, they show it by their actions, not by their words. So that's my concern, that that would happen, because it certainly wouldn't be any benevolent UFO, ETs, good ETs at this point, because they know how damaged in the brain, how mental and how psychotic the cabal are, because they're losing, but they're trying to create the illusion that they're still in control and keep the hand of fear on the people for as long as they can. They will try and do as much damage as they possibly can before Trump comes in. And on that note, sir, may I say my own thoughts on that? And to people out there, if you still think it's about sides, you've missed the point. It isn't about Trump, a single individual. He's not the king of the world, he's not Jesus, and he's not the savior of the universe. It is a massive group of great people in this effect. It's about humanity, isn't it, Dr. Salla? This is what people have to get rid of their political, because of the brainwashing and the programming in them, it puts them into a violent, adverse response when they think it's all about Trump. And they're losing their own access to love and humanity and the truth of what's happening on our planet. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's very interesting. There's been quite a few people that have said that Donald Trump was approached to run for the Republicans Party around 2014, 2015 by a group of generals, because they could see what was going to happen. That under a Hillary Clinton administration, that a war would be manufactured against Russia, and that would take us down a very dark path as a planet, that there would be kind of disintegration, because this is what Hillary Clinton represents. I mean, she's never created anything. She's been associated with death, destruction. I mean, her most famous line is bragging about the death of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, who was actually doing a lot of good things in Libya and for Africa, for North Africa especially, and she bragged about not only destabilizing his regime and removing him from power, but in killing him. And so Trump was approached to prevent Hillary Clinton from becoming the president, because that would have taken us as a planet down the very dark path to oblivion, a nuclear war with Russia and China. And so Trump came in, and he came in with really good credentials because he was a Democrat before becoming a Republican. I mean, he's always been leaning Democrat. So he was really a unifier. But what the deep state did was they recognized that he was really going to unify America. And so they did everything they could to demonize him, because he was a threat to their agenda to get Hillary Clinton into power. And so, we know what happened during his first administration, where they did everything they could to remove him and taint him. And now you had this Biden administration that came in after a massive election. Well, I don't want to say it because I don't want to get your channel into trouble, but there was something massive that happened that led to Trump not uh, being ushered into power in 2020, and Biden instead came in. Guess what that was? And in 2024, and this kind of shows the maturity, I think, of Trump and the people around him, that they were prepared to surrender power, even though they knew that the evidence was there to show that there was something massive that had happened to deny Trump coming in. But for 4 years, they allowed the Biden administration to run the show, and they just operated from behind the scenes and to try and raise people's awareness. And it's been a great success. There's just so many more people that are aware now of the deep state and how the deep state manipulates and blackmails and controls politicians and uses different bureaucracies for lawfare against anyone that is a threat to their agenda. And now you've got Trump coming in again, and I think he is a very important individual because he represents the interests of these white hats, of these people within the US military and political system that really do want to protect and preserve America so that America can play a very important role in for the rest of the 21st century, as opposed to those in the deep state that want to weaken and undermine America so it becomes irrelevant, and then all power is handed off to China. So China becomes the world's hegemon, and that really would be a disaster. So I think it's a really good thing that the Trump himself has been helped to achieve this electoral victory.
It's very interesting, and the way that you lay that out there is so important. Now, you mentioned Gaddafi, and here's a really good point to make. It is incredible to witness, having I lived in Costa Rica, Hawaii, which they say is part of America, but it's Hawaii. And as you've lived there too, and now I'm back in England, and I am absolutely stunned at the hatred for Putin, for Trump, for Xi in this country. You cannot have a balanced, grounded conversation with intelligent people here because they are so wound up with the way that the BBC and ITV and the news media forcibly educates and schools and grooms every day in that hypnotic trance, over and over, how evil he is. It's pointless. And if you even deign to suggest that he might be a good guy, like I say to people, I used to think he was the biggest idiot ever. I thought he was so rude to women, just crass, just, got kicked out of Scotland, got kicked off a golf course. People, look at me and my gob, right? You could say all these things about me too, yeah? He's just a very open, whatever person. But you can't hide some of the things he said, you know what I mean? But anyway, so my head was turned only one time, and then I began to look at him differently when he said, let's have an international no child trafficking day. And on that day years ago, I thought, my God, maybe you do actually care about the children. And from then things started to literally roller coaster, into this awakening, this opening. And, the COVID era was absolutely horrific for all of us, for all of us. But God, what a blessing too. What an ability to actually sit and take stock and people to grow in themselves and their own kind of spirit of consciousness or science of consciousness and really start to see and think. But back to Gaddafi, the same thing happened in Britain. He was so loathed. Everybody was told he's a monster, he's this, he's that. We all believed it. I believed it. I didn't know to think any other way other than what I was programmed. And this is a good reminder to other people watching this. No matter what age you are, do you believe everything you're told? If so, why? Is it true? Look at other elements, do other readings, listen to other people so you can make your own decision and not have a decision made for you. In Britain, the TV, the news is very, very, very much different to America. It's very violent. Like they will show you terrible things. They always have done. We witnessed the assassination of Gaddafi. We saw him being pulled out of a drain and shot. It was awful. And I remember, even though I knew that I'd been programmed to say he was a murdering monster and he let people starve and all the stories they told about him, which I have no idea if they're true because I never met him, seeing someone assassinated was just disturbed me for the whole of my life, and then that I don't know what you describe it as, that half monster freak Clinton, Hillary. She harmed a girlfriend of mine. Her name's Kathy O'Brien. It's in Kathy O'Brien's book. And so, Enough said there. But the programming is really the biggest issue I think that we have. The people allowing themselves to admit they've been programmed, groomed, and schooled, and to start pulling back and really having their own thoughts and not worrying about what other people say. It's like me, it's clear I don't worry what anybody says or thinks. And therein lies the freedom of the human, you know? Isn't that true?
Yeah, we have to speak our truth, no matter how difficult it is, and some people might not like it, and especially when they've been programmed by the legacy media, the mainstream media, and I think that's where, your show, my show, and many other podcasters, we're doing something really revolutionary. What we're doing is we are challenging the legacy media as the premier way in which people get their news. I mean, and I'm sure there are many millions like me now. We used to get our news by, reading the New York Times, the Washington Post, or going to CNN. I mean, that was 20 years ago when I was a university professor. That's what I would do. In the mornings, I would brief myself by, going to those sources. Now I will go to the different I go to watch the different podcasters. What are the different podcasters saying about the world? That's my primary source of information for what's going on. So this is the alternative news, and that is such a big threat to the legacy media. And I know in the United States, there was an effort to kind of like suppress that, but that's been unsuccessful. I know in Britain right now that there are laws there where people are being jailed for these, what do they call it? Non-crime hate speech or something like that, where people just will tweet something or repost something on social media, which is interpreted as a hate as a hate act or something like that, but it's not something that will land you into jail uh, immediately, but it goes onto your record. And then more recently, they've changed things, and now people are being jailed for hate crime in Britain, and that's intended to crush the alternative media and to kind of like to have the uh, legacy media become the dominant way in which people in Britain get their news. Because as you said, people are brainwashed to believe Gaddafi was this monster, when in fact he was a great leader in North Africa. He was really doing wonderful things for Libya and the people of that region. But yeah, they use the legacy media to demonize him and remove him from power. So I think, yes, we need to be discerning. We need to really support the alternative media. Go there, watch Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and the podcasters. And I think that's very important.
Talking to Tucker Carlson just very quickly, and again, for me, just to make a point of like not using your platform or your belief system to try and convert the masses. So he shared a story where he was in bed just a few weeks ago, or in the last few months. He's in his bed with his wife and his dogs. Everyone's fast asleep. And he was aware of some kind of negative demonic presence, and it actually physically scratched him. He gets up and he sees he's been scratched by a demon. And he said his wife is normally a light sleeper, but she stayed asleep and so did the dogs. And it obviously frightened him and freaked him out. It scared him so much, he returned to Christ. He turned his heart to, a faith because he didn't know what it was, because he doesn't have experience in that way to know what that was. I know what it was. It's one of my areas of expertise, the dark side, the witches, the warlocks. Here again is where we have to remind people that what you're looking at is long-term occult practices. When we talk about the Cabal, we have to remember torture just went underground. All that abuse, all the child trafficking, everything negative went underground. But the magic, the black magic with a K, went nowhere. And the military is stuffed full of witches and warlocks. And, musicians, they have the demonizing of the music, the records, the albums that go out. It is all there to be seen. And we are literally shattering people's illusions and their patterns. But back to Tucker for a second here. So I heard him tell his story. And then I see this bishop, this man with a collar, and he literally said, that demon was allowed to attack Tucker Carlson because God allowed the demon to attack Tucker Carlson because he needs to return to God. And I'm like, mate, you're like one of those sad vicars at the side of the grave. Three people have turned up, but you're convincing them they have to give their heart to the Lord. They have to be saved. Like Eleanor Rigby, that song the Beatles sang. That was not the time or the place. What he should have said is the truth that Tucker Carlson, because he's been such a light on the planet, he's kicked indoors, he's moved away from the clutches of being owned and programmed to say what he's supposed to say. He's a threat. So they did black magic on him. They sent demonic energy to him. They, humans that work in these practices, these dark practices. It's very simple. And again, people, again, bringing the ancient arts into 2024 and being able to say, my goodness, does that really exist? Yes, it does. It's all part and parcel. There isn't a system that's separated, right? So again, we are shattering, patterns and programming and illusions that people have had. And we're going to do it again right now. Now, in Britain, we have the royal family. Okay, we grow up with the royal family. You grow up to such an extent that I guess in America it would be like the Kennedys, of Jackie Kennedy and all them. There'd be like a family that you see the little kids and you have this kind of affection. It's normal. It's psychological, normality. And in England, we had the Queen and Princess Anne and Charlie Boy and Andrew and all of them. And then little William and little Charles and Diana. Oh, she was the one for me, Diana. Anyway, regardless of all of that, you feel like you have a connection to them. British people will fall on the sword and die on the hill for a member of a royal family that will never know their name and will never even know what they've done in their honor. Okay? So you interviewed a guy the other day, and his book is called The Antichrist and a Cup of Tea. And he was talking about the biblical prophecy of the Antichrist, which he believes to be Prince Charles, King Charles now, King Charles. Now, to those of you British, if you want to be offended, that's on you, my love. It's got nothing to do with me. I don't cater to any of the systems, and if you think it's disrespectful, just go and watch something else. Would you like to share a little bit about the incredible the way that the man put the story together? It was really fascinating. I don't know if I believe it, but it was really fascinating. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. Tim Cohen, I mean, I met him or began talking with him well over 10 years ago. I think it was around 2010, 2012. We began talking about the Mars um, uh, data, showing life on Mars. And he told me about his book. And I kind of just looked at his book, as you said, the Antichrist and a Cup of Tea. And he thought that Prince Charles, or the Prince of Wales at the time, was going to be or was the Antichrist. And I thought that was so ridiculous at the time. And to be honest, at that time, I mean, I had a liking for Prince Charles because I kind of like, because I know he always had a really tough time with his father, Prince
Yeah.
Philip. And they had a really kind of antagonistic relationship that Prince Philip really dumped on his son Charles. So I could kind of could empathize with that, and Charles's advocacy of a lot of things like the global protecting the global environment and wanting to do a lot of these positive things. I kind of identified with that. So I was always was very kind of fond of Prince Charles, but without being kind of like a monarchist. I was born and raised in Australia, and of course, as you know, Australia, the King Charles is the sovereign, and Queen Elizabeth was the sovereign before that, and we have a Governor General. But the Queen and the King, yeah, they're always a big part of the Australian psyche. So when he told me this stuff, Tim Cohen, I dismissed it. I thought, oh, okay, this is ridiculous. And I remember other people at the time that were talking about the Antichrist. Who would that be? There's this very there were a number of kind of like researchers that were saying, well, the Antichrist that would be Marbus in the Nostradamus information, and they pointed to either Osama bin Laden or they pointed to Salman bin Mohammed bin Salman MBS, the current crown prince of Saudi Arabia, as being the Antichrist. So I kind of thought, well, that's probably more accurate. So what really got my attention was a number of things over the last uh, 12 months. One that really got my attention was a mission that JP was taken on, where he said when he came back from that mission, they had brought back these seeds from the tree of life and from these rejuvenating plants. And these seeds were given by this underground civilization for as a gift to the American people. And so he says that immediately when he got out, he and that mission, the seeds and that gift were taken to King Charles. And it was like, wow, what that's interesting. And then I watched um, a remote viewing session done by the group of remote viewers out of Hawaii that's run by Dick Ulgai. Now they call themselves Future Forecasting. And they did a remote viewing of the coronation of King Charles. And they said that in addition to the public ceremony that everyone saw on TV, there was a private ceremony. And that private ceremony was the real transfer of power. And that involved kind of like satanic elements, sacrifice, and all of that. So that got my attention. And then I more recently I interviewed a George Cavassalis, an Australian contactee, and he yeah, so and he says that there was this demonic entity, that a very powerful dark demonic entity that had taken over the body of King Charles. So that got my attention. And then you have that official portrait of King Charles, where you have that really bizarre portrait. Look, it's this really ghastly or ghostly shades of red uh, with King Charles. And people did a kind of reverse image. They did a reverse image of the portrait. They put the two reverse images side by side, and sure enough, right in the middle there was this demon, and people recognized it as a Baphomet. So to me, when you add all of those kind of like synchronicities together, it shows that wow, Tim Cohen was correct. So that's why I decided, okay, I've got to actually interview him and put his information out, because I think he's correct that King Charles is this very dark, or his body. I mean, the real King Charles is gone. That spirit, that soul that was King Charles, that I was that I was aware of, that soul has been removed and has been replaced by this demon. That, whether you call it a walk-in, whether you call it a possession, but I think that being in King Charles right now is this demonic entity, whether you call it Baphomet, whether you call it the Antichrist. But yeah, I think that's, and when you look at the role Britain has been playing to perpetuate this war in the Ukraine, where over 1 million Ukrainians, maybe as many as 2 million young men, have been seriously injured or killed. I mean, that is really demonic.
It's horrendous. And again, the portrait, that awful, hideous portrait of him, like you say, like you just revealed there with and a lot of people could say, oh, that's just ridiculous. Okay, maybe, and maybe not. Again, it's like, do your study, do your research, think about these things. There was a point where people thought it was Obama that was the Antichrist. I remember how when he came out, with Trump after him years ago. And I remember thinking, God, Trump is so rude when he was saying, but this is how programmed I was at the time. And it gave me a good reason to like look back at my behaviors at that time. I couldn't believe that Trump was calling out Obama for him to show his passport, his birth certificate rather. I remember thinking, oh my God, that's so rude. It's so personal. And that's how I used to think, because that's how programmed I was. I believed, like, oh my God, he's so rude. Everything they say about him, this big orange man and la 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 la, and Obama's so me, and then they say, no, Obama's the Phoenix or the Pindar or the head of the Satanic Brotherhood, and who knows? But there's so many curious things that have happened with that bloke too. Not to mention, You mentioned Osama bin Laden, who we know was a CIA soldier at some point and was trained by the CIA. No one denies that. They conveniently forget it, but let's bring that into the room for a moment. Why did they bury him at sea and why was there no body? Why didn't we see the body? Why didn't we see the proof? Hey, that just went away. Oh, just like 9/11, when the buildings that fell into their own footprint, the controlled demolition. Oh, but let's put that behind because the governments all love you. They really do. Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, what are your thoughts on those last aspects there?
Well, as I recall, that Osama bin Laden death, I mean, I think that happened just before the election, where Obama was in he had to be re-elected, and I think John McCain, he was up against John McCain, as I recall, and that Osama bin Laden raid and death was kind of like I think staged because there's stories that he had already died and so forth, and the burial at sea was to kind of like get rid of the evidence that this was actually a clone or a double or not the real Osama. So yeah, I'm not very clear on that, but I think when it comes to Obama, I kind of like I tend to be I look at him and I think, well, the one thing I do think he was very instrumental in achieving during his administration was that he denied Hillary Clinton the presidency in 2008. And if Hillary Clinton had won the Democratic nomination against Obama in 2008, I mean, we probably wouldn't be here. I mean, we might be living in a kind of Terminator type existence right now, with AI robots fighting it all out in some kind of new post-nuclear holocaust, because Hillary Clinton is an evil person. And Obama, he was put into that position, and I think that Obama was working with a faction of the Earth-based reptilians, or that he is associated with the Earth-based reptilians. And I say that because one of Obama's first things that he did was when he went to Saudi Arabia after winning election in 2008. I think he went in 2009. He went there to Saudi Arabia and he bowed. He did a deep bow to the king, and I think that indicated his true allegiance. It was, and I think the Saudi Arabia, they I think are associated with this kind of underground reptilian kingdom on Earth. And people think, oh, reptilians are evil. Well, no, there's degrees here. The Earth-based reptilians are indigenous to the planet. And I think that he was showing his loyalty, that he was loyal to that faction, to that group, that power group on Earth, whereas Hillary Clinton was associated more with the kind of Rockefellers. I mean, her husband, Bill Clinton, was he's an illegitimate child of the Rockefellers, according to several researchers. So she's associated with the Rockefellers. You have the Rothschilds in England, or dominating that kind of that. So the deep state has different factions in there. So that 2008 election, I think that was very, very important. That Obama, by denying Hillary Clinton the Democratic nomination, I think he prevented at that time Hillary getting power, and Hillary and the Rockefellers, or that dark faction, would have taken us down a very destructive path. And people can agree or disagree about Obama, but Obama, what I liked about Obama was that he did not support the war effort. He did not support a new war against Iran. I remember the generals, cussing him out that he was this pussy that just wouldn't allow them to go to war against Iran. He came up with this agreement. So I tend to not be so harsh against Obama because he did prevent us getting into a war with Iran, and he did prevent Clinton from coming to power. He did that for 8 years, and then you had Trump come in, and yeah, I think Clinton tried again under Trump, and she failed.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, you and I, we're having adult conversations about things that a lot of people don't have the courage to talk about. And even if we're both wrong on everything, it doesn't matter. What matters is everything is aired and everything is put on the table. And people start having more confidence to share their true feelings and their true thoughts. And don't let others lock them down, shut them down, because, what if everything you said is true? This is part of the fabric of our world, the history of our world, the people who have been creating and making sure systems, are put in place. So it's very, very important, what happens from this moment out. I love that you mentioned JP and his connection to the ant people underground. And we mentioned the seeds. That upset me so much. I couldn't handle that expedition that JP did with the American military when they went underground to inner earth to the ant people, and they were forced to bring ancient seeds and bring them to England to the king. It bothered me. It kept me up for nights. I was bloody mad at the Ant King. I was bloody mad at the universe. I was mad at everyone. I'm like, this cannot be. This just cannot be allowed. All this severance and bowing and, all these kind of, I guess, prime directive type, or Earth directive, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But, and then they returned the seeds, didn't they? Did we share that bit in this broadcast here? I can't remember. We've just covered so many areas.
Right, yes. So th those seeds were returned, and that kind of like helped rebuild the relationship with the ant people because they said that those seeds were intended for Americans, or that they had a particular purpose for sharing those seeds. So yeah, that was a very important development. As far as what it was that was going on, I think what you have is that these covert missions that JP was a part of, they always have a operative from the occult or from the Freemasons, and that was one of the things that I wasn't aware of it. That I didn't realize that as the Prince of Wales, Charles is the nominal head of the Freemason order worldwide. I wasn't aware of that, and that kind of like made it kind of like clear now how someone like Charles, in that capacity, had that authority to be able to order this American covert mission into this underground ant kingdom in Florida that brought back these precious seeds, to order those to be taken to England. And it's like, well, why would the American military allow this? Well, it's because this is the way missions are conducted, that uh, all the missions have these operatives from the Freemasons. And Radu Cinema said the same thing about the Bujej, the Hall of Records in the Bujej Mountains, that all the covert missions to the Hall of Records, they always had these high-level Freemasons embedded in those missions, because at any time they could step in and take away what it was that was found, or cover it up, or play a role in suppressing information. So yeah, so I think those seeds, they really did exemplify how Charles, as the Prince of Wales, and now the King, had this kind of authority. But thankfully, they were brought back.
Yeah, thankfully they were brought back. Absolutely. One thing I've never heard anyone talk about, you mentioned the coronation of the, King Charles going from prince to king, and the bizarre ancient ritual that we had confirmed was definitely a nod to Satan and reptilian. I mean, very strange. But those that know would know that. Most of us would never know that. We would never clue what we're looking at. We think it's all lovely, antiquated, and but we were told otherwise. And again, people can, just take a breath, because it's jarring to hear these words, and especially if you've been brainwashed to believe everything you're told, you don't want to hear it. You really don't want to hear it. There was a woman that I haven't seen anyone talk about during the whole ritual. There was a woman. She had long, kind of light brown, wavy hair, and she had a hat on. It was kind of an aqua blue, and a kind of an aqua blue outfit, and she was holding a staff. And I watched it with my parents. Because whatever, it was on in the house, we were watching it. And I said to them, "Who's that bird? Like, what is she doing?" And she was in every scene of it. And I'm like, "Who is she? What's her role in this?" And they didn't have a clue. In fact, my mum hadn't even noticed her. I thought, that's interesting. So I'd like to know, anyone out there, if they know, like, who was that woman in the bluey green aquamarine outfit with the staff, the wooden staff or whatever, some kind of a staff that was that walking through, almost leading. And she wasn't mentioned. That was the other thing. I don't remember the newscaster, broadcaster mentioning who on earth she was. But again, when we're witnessing ancient rituals, which that was and is, we don't get the full package. And we don't always hear if there's undercurrent Gregorian chants, if there's chanting being played backwards, if there's certain ancient Latin quotes, being spoken over that ritual that we're seeing, and again, remembering that Latin is not a dead language. It just went underground. Those buggers speak it all the time. Again, we've got to keep bringing the truth all the time to the people, which is definitely what you do, Dr. Michael Salla. You're very, very good at that. I'm just going to check my notes here to make sure that we haven't missed anything that I really wanted to share. Oh, one thing I wanted to share was, what are your thoughts at the moment on, let's say, for example, Göbekli Tepe, ancient, you know, historical site that's been uncovered. And some of the people speaking at our conference 2025 in England, JJ Ainsworth and Hugh Newman, and Praveen Mohan from India, a lot of people will know who he is. He's all about the ancient technology and the Hindu iconography, areas that we must research fully now and bring to the people through Agisic. But there is at Göbekli Tepe proof that they have put hundreds of trees over areas that are unexcavated, yeah, and they're concreting over areas and deciding the next generation can go and uncover. It's not for us. And when you follow the trail of what Muppet decided that, it leads to a guy who is affiliated with the World Economic Forum. That's not okay on my watch. Nobody has the right to decide which generation. Who the hell do they think they are? What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, well, that's pretty consistent with the way the deep state has been operating. I mean, they've been covering up the truths concerning these ancient or pre-diluvial civilizations, whether in Egypt, whether in Romania, whether in this area of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. They've been covering it all up. That, where excavations are allowed, as in Egypt, they have a tight control over just how much is revealed. In the Bujej Mountains, they've kind of like sealed everything. They've decided they're going to cover it up, and of course, Göbekli Tepe. That it's not a great surprise to me that they've decided to do the same thing. But this is where I think it's very important that we, in the general public, that are working with the Galactics, that have these abilities, that we can go in there and that into these places and explore for ourselves and talk about it. And this is where uh, I recently came back from Romania, and Elena Danan and Corina Pataki were there, and they did I guess you would call it a psychic projection underneath uh, the surface of where we were standing. So we're talking like maybe 20 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters underneath where we were standing. They psychically projected themselves, and they were able to walk around the Hall of Records. And they described it, and Elena described it as not a hall of records per se, but more an ancient Anak or Anunnaki uh, laboratory that she had seen, or she had worked in one of those in a previous incarnation. So I think this is the sort of thing that the deep state, that the Freemasons want to cover up from the general public and just kind of like keep to themselves. And I think the same thing is happening in Göbekli Tepe. I mean, it had already happened in Egypt, and I think, and the same thing probably in other places like Bosnia with the pyramids there.
Yeah, so true. And again, things can be uncovered very, very simply. We reveal things like this, a cover up, so then people say, no, 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 that's not okay. We're not having that. We're not allowing it. Who said that could happen? No. People have to understand how powerful they are. If they do nothing, but just tell Jane on the phone about it, it's just going to stay between Gilly and Jane. Nothing's going to change. So when people, as you know, have these discussions, have the courage, don't worry what somebody thinks, they're not a prisoner because they don't care what someone thinks. Somebody doesn't own their soul because they speak their mind. If you look at, let's say, Machu Picchu, for example, I've been there too. And the mystery, the great mystery, where did all the people go? Did they go up on a UFO? No, we're still thinking with 3D Western modalities. We're still using a 3D mind. That's why people can't figure out what the pyramids are still, some of them. I know we know what they are, the technology that they are, but it's so ridiculous and so embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed, but it's at the level of NASA, the low end of level, grade one, where NASA like to keep the world. But of course, you and I, well, I in particular, ignore NASA. But I want to say about Machu Picchu, if they knew the truth, you know the truth when you travel, of course, that most of the people that used to live there and inhabit that place, they bury them inside the mountain. They bury them inside the mountain, some in embryonic style, some are buried in such a way that they're facing the mountain across on Machu Picchu. But nobody thought they're looking underground for bones, assuming that the whole rest of the world buries their dead. And it's something like that. And when people find out, they go, oh my goodness, I never knew to bring to mind that that was even an aspect or a theory or a ritual that the ancients did. And then it makes you want to, I hope, discover, read a book, go get an old book in an old bookstore, one that hasn't been redacted, or it's like this book I always used to bang on about, Nikola Tesla, and a series of papers that he wrote, and it's called My Inventions, and I love that book. Well, my copy went moldy when I was living in Costa Rica because everything gets bloody moldy in Costa Rica. So I bought another copy, and there's tons of pages missing, which is just wicked, absolutely wicked. But there is this, as you know, this consistent need to dumb us down. But honestly, we're all too clever. And I mean all of us, everyone watching this, we're just too bloody clever. So it's time we all came out and started having our conversations. So I wanted you also, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but I want to talk about the award that you got at GISIC. But did you have any thoughts on what I just said there?
Yeah, well, I think this is critical. I mean, this is where we have to take charge of the environment that we live in, that we have to actually start to explore, start to learn the truth and reveal that and break free of this kind of like this gaslighting that the legacy media does, that the deep state, the controllers perpetuate to kind of pull the wool over people's eyes, that we have to be the ones that wake people up. Because yeah, we are the ones that care about it. We're the ones that are naturally empathic, and so we want others to be elevated. The difference between the elite and us is that on many levels they're very similar to us. They're interested in UFOs, ancient technology. They're interested in improving themselves. But what they lack is they close their heart center down, because that's the key for them to be able to rise in the ranks of these dark circles. That when you give up something you love most in life. I mean, if all of us think of the thing that you love most in life, and you had to give that up as a rite of passage to be able to be promoted into the kind of like high echelons in some leadership cult. Well, that's what's going to separate the vast majority of humanity from the psychopaths that run the planet. Because the psychopaths, they close down the heart center, they have no empathy, so they don't care about people. Whereas the rest of us, we see that there's a lot of people that are in the dark, that are ignorant, and we look at them and we say, okay, let's educate them, let's lift them up. And whereas the psychopaths, they look at those that are ignorant or don't know what's going on, and they're contemptuous and they just want to eliminate them. So yeah, very big difference.
Definitely, definitely. Again, in terms of you bringing to the world true reality, especially what's happening and happened in the military, where we're saying to people, the American military have been going to the moon, to Jupiter, to Ganymede, to Mars forever, to Ceres colony, to many, many different places. And that book, your US Army missions, your latest book on your missions with JP is an absolute must. I've read the last two. And anybody who wants to see what the types of missions that the American military actually do, that they actually do with live physical soldiers. And in my opinion, I don't care for the way that our darling JP has been treated and used in some of these experiments. It's been very concerning. Again, they throw them away. They'll shoot them down. They'll jab them. They'll leave them to rot on the side of the road. The veterans, the beloved veterans that they say they're so proud of. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And all of that. They should be taken to task for that. But that book is very, very important. All of them are, not to mention all your books on the secret space programs that you've written. I mean, what are you at is it volume 9? Like in that particular series, not including JP's books with you?
Yeah, I've written 7 books on the secret space programs and now 3 books on JP's US Army Insider missions. And so yeah, definitely I'll be coming out with more books in both series over the years ahead. Just finding time to do that.
I know because you're doing so much and you received an award, and I do want you to share it because you're so important to everybody. You're so loved. You are so loved, Dr. Michael Salla. And would you want to share the award that you received from GISIC last year?
Okay, this is the award I got from the Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection Conference from 2023. It is a recognition award honoring your dedication and excellence in the field of exopolitics. So this was uh, a wonderful award, and I do feel that these kinds of awards do make a difference because yeah, they really encourage us who are working in the field to just keep doing what we're doing, and it is very nice because many of us who have had professional backgrounds, we were ostracized from careers. I would have, if I had stayed in academia, I would have been a full professor. I would have achieved all of the kind of things that a full professor achieves in academia. I was on that path, but I made a conscious choice in 2001 when I saw the Disclosure Project press conference that was organized by Stephen Greer. I made a conscious choice. I realized that what those 21 witnesses were saying was true, was the truth. I mean, I could have just said, "Oh well, it's really entertaining," but it doesn't. It's something that would threaten my career, and I'm just going to focus on my career and go on and become one of those kind of like just one of many of thousands of academics earning a salary and thinking that they're making a difference. But I realized that uh, those guys were telling the truth, and I felt that it was very important for me to share that information in my field of expertise. And of course, it was all downhill as far as academia was concerned, but I had to go down this other path of being a part of the alternative media and being an independent researcher. And to be honest, things have turned out very well. But for a good decade after I was thrown out of the university system, it really was life on the bleeding edge.
Oh, bless you, sir. Well, we're so happy that you found your true calling, which is basically exopolitics, telling the truth of all the governments and military systems, the history, everything on and off planet that is important that us humans deserve and demand to know. So thank goodness that we have you. And I'm also so happy that I don't want to over promote, but that you've spoken at every single G6. You've spoken at Jessic, every single one. All those people that over promote, honestly, they're always pushing their merchandise. Oh, who do they think they are?
You got a great event, Danny, and it's very, very important. I mean, I've been going to conferences. I think 2003, uh, I've been going to conferences since 2003, And yours is the first one that really creates a welcoming environment for contactees. None of the other conferences that I've been to have done that. I mean, it's funny. I mean, you have a conference, a big conference called Contact in the Desert, but they don't invite contactees. That's just so weird. I mean, they have abductees. They have people coming, yeah, the guy Grace took me up there and they raped me and took my semen and created hybrids or took my eggs and created babies and all of that. You know, they'll have you do that. But the contactees, they're kind of like very rarely. I mean, do they invite the contactees, have them come on stage and talk about the information? But your conference does that in spades. You really make it a welcome environment for contactees and you do the discernment as well. You actually have real contactees. You don't have people that just have a story with no evidence to support them. You actually have people up there who have evidence, who can talk with authority about different extraterrestrial civilizations that are visiting our planet. And so, you create a welcome environment. And what's really, I think, the great gift for those attending your conferences is that, not only do you get to hear a great lineup of speakers, but you also get to meet a really wonderful audience that are in tune with you. And that's where you get the whole, the star families coming together. This is like a reunion of star families, which is, I mean, it's unique. There's no other conference that does it.
Thank you for saying that. And you are telling the truth, of course. And it's so beautiful. And there's so many wonderful things that happen. Like, for example, Dave D in Australia. Hi, Dave. He was messaging me today, and he's created with other Australians a remote viewing group that our beloved Tony Rodriguez is overseeing and giving some education. So people are finding each other, creating groups, falling in love, getting married, becoming roommates, buying businesses together. I mean, there's just so much because they're on the same wavelength and they want to grow and they're creating their own communities because so many of us are contactees, abductees, have sin, know, have these abilities, and we don't know where to go and we want to feel safe. And so at a GISIC, at a Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference, it is that lovely logo again. That's what you get. You get that, when we take care of people and we have fun and we love and we laugh and we cry and we share and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I couldn't be prouder. It's the greatest thing I do in my life the last few years, for definite. And you're right. There's no bully bullshit standing on stage. If you have a story, you have to be able to prove it. At this point, we should be really invested in physical evidence. And again, nod to the beautiful Elena Danan. If you want more proof of physical evidence that someone's in contact with spacecraft and the Earth military, and the Earth military know who Elena Danan is. Sorry to all the super soldier boys out there that actually aren't super soldiers, but want to be, the 48 strand ones that are commanding all the fleets in the sky. Prove it, boys. Come on, boys. Show us your ships. Elena Danan showed you hers. Oh, they go for her, Dr. Salla, don't they? They go for that great lady in space. They attack her. It's always the boys. The girls know better, I think. The women know better. They feel her energy and they're like, ooh, I'm not a crazy person. But the boys, they come for her. They come for me too, and they feel my Dr. Martin boots and my baseball bat. Had to do that today. But that's what we have to do. We have to tell them. We have to let them know what time it is. It is full disclosure time. That is what it is. Dr. Salla, I love and adore you. I respect you so much. You're the loveliest man in the world. You'll be speaking in May 10th and 11th in Eastbourne, East Sussex, England. You'll also be speaking at Argisic in America, which we're going to release dates on soon. We think it's going to be in September, potentially in Nashville. We'll let the audience know. But can you leave us with your final thoughts after the information and subjects that we've covered today, which are vast? And there may be a few people laying down or crying in the corner because we may have shattered a couple of dreams of things that weren't true that we had to let people know. What would you like to say to them, my love?
Well, this is a time right now, this is a time where you can be optimistic about what's coming. I think we've been through a very dark period. I mean, in the United States, under this Biden administration, there were many times when things could have gone really, really bad. And over the next 6 weeks, I think we are going to come out of that. And once this Trump administration comes in, I think we're going to get disclosure. I think this is where it was going to move straight ahead into incredible disclosures where all of the advanced technologies that have been suppressed for for decades will be released. There are over 6,000 patents in the United States that have been suppressed under national security orders. They haven't been granted because they deal with perpetual energy, free energy, anti-gravity, alternative healing, holographic healing, all of these kind of technological innovations that would heal our planet, give us energy, transform our planet overnight. But they've all been suppressed because the deep state knew that in order to control the Earth, they had to keep us technologically suppressed. Because once we reached a certain level of technological development, then the galactics would reveal themselves. So this is what they've been doing. So this is going to be, I think, the first thing that's going to happen with this new Trump administration, why Elon Musk has been given such a prominent role, because he's going to be the guy that's going to unveil a lot of these suppressed energies. And once that is done, then the stage has been set for the galactics revealing themselves openly. I mean, they're going to be doing it secretly or they're going to be doing it covertly, but I think they're going to be doing it in a way so that the whole world can't deny that we are being visited and mentored and helped by these positive human-looking extraterrestrials that have been around for a long time, and that now with the collapse of the deep state, with the removal of this final kind of like opposition to the agenda that Trump has with the Earth Alliance, with the White Hats, with the positive extraterrestrials. It's going to be really an incredible 4 years that is coming, and I think the world will change in ways that people won't be able to recognize at the end, where we are and where we will be. So it is really wonderful, and I'm so glad to be working with you and Elena, JP, Tony Rodriguez, Nikki Allen, and many others to make this happen.
Yeah, it's just a joyful, joyful event, and we all feel the same way about you. And it's important for people to find groups of people that they can connect to and trust and feel, a place of use for their own discernment as well. It's very, very important. Well, like I said, you are much loved, and I look so forward to you moving forward in your nomination and being the one that is nominated at the highest levels. And also, I'm sure you would be introducing the technology of the great Dan Willis and the great David Adair for their also repressed technology in frill and anti-gravity craft and electromagnetic fusion containment engines is what David Adair has been so massively adept in, and propulsion, energetic frequencies. It's such an exciting time. So thank you so much, sir. Send you my love and definitely see you soon, Dr. Michael Salla.
Thank you, Danny.
Aloha, mahalo. And to you guys out there, I am Danny Henderson, and I do send love from my heart to yours. And even though at times I know I come off a bit gobby and a bit passionate, it's all right. It's all right. It's my love and my passion and my expression for humanity and making sure that I, in my own way, can wake up as many of us as possible to the truth that we are amazing, incredible, powerful beings. Until next time, I'll see you soon.